When examining and analyzing the sophisticated and classy world of video games, there are often many avenues one can take. You may explore themes in a heavy story-driven game, like how Silent Hill 2 has 3 gazillion videos made about it regurgitating the same talking points ad infinitum. Or, you could explore how gameplay mechanics can cause players to explore and see more of a game, like how there are 3 bazillion video essays made about how Dark Souls made people overcome the titty spider. Or, you could look at an old video game console and examine its value, just like how there are 3 million videos of people asking if the Nintendo 3DS is still worth playing. Yet, in the world of racing games, there is not actually much to say. Too few of them have any stories worthy of analysis. Most racing games can be mechanically summarized in a very short way. And to be honest, there is only so many times I can listen to how Blur was underrated. You do not need to keep telling me. I am aware. YouTube never lets me forget. To be fair, when the vast majority of your games are just advertisements for consumer products, there is not an essay's worth of things to note about racing games without just getting to a point where you give the game random rambling superlatives. But if there was really nothing to talk about with car games on a whole, this video would not have been a thing. I would have been wasting your time. I thought there would not be much for me to say about racing games after my lack of storytelling and gameplay diversity rant. Go watch that. But alas, I was suddenly struck to make another video about racing games, or, in this case, their vibe and presentation. More precisely, how the vibe and language of the car game varies depending on where in the world the racing game is made. Most specifically, the 2 big video game development giants, Japan versus the West. I have lumped North America and Europe together into just the West, because although there are various differences between American car bros and Euro vehicle stands, I have found that when it comes to video game development, these 2 areas have rather similar design preferences that could almost be considered the same. Quite unlike how Japanese develop games, where they have their own little emphasis on particularities that makes them stand out and worthy of individual isolation. Regardless, I bet you're actually wondering how this video is going to go, so let's get into it. Forza Motorsport is the American version of Gran Turismo. In fact, this was the main goal of Forza from its conception, to be the sim racing game on the Xbox, as Gran Turismo is the sim racing game on the PlayStation. Kiki Wolfkill, a Microsoft director in 2005, said of the Forza Motorsport 1 development as, quote, "We are targeting Gran Turismo with this game on Xbox, and I think we've been very focused on that. We have a lot of respect for Gran Turismo, which helps us derive that desire to beat them." End quote. A simple gameplay comparison of the 2 games, just seeing the cars race around the track, you could make the claim that Forza does a very good job at being the Gran Turismo on Xbox. The cars look so good, the handling is so realistic. And in that aspect, yes, they are the same, as a car in Japan is the same as a car in North America. We could spend ages talking about which game has the better handling and detail of the car models down to really minute minutiaes, but I'm sorry to slow your fanboy roll. I don't think differences in that department are anything cultural. Those are more dependent on the tools each dev has at their disposal, aka money and time. No, to show the best way Turn 10 approached the mood and presentation of their game versus Polyphony Digital, let's take a look at what happens when you finish a race in Forza Motorsport 1 versus Gran Turismo 4. It's a small detail, but Gran Turismo plays a short jingle, says finish in a big font, and then shows you the race results. Forza just shows race results unceremoniously. A very small example of how much Forza presents what it really cares about. You can tell me this doesn't matter, and maybe it doesn't really in the grand scheme of things, but it is a good example of how the design philosophies of Forza versus Gran Turismo, Eastern versus Western design philosophies. Western cultures, and of course in this case, American cultures, often require things immediately. We are the land of fast food, assembly lines, and pre-built homes. We just want the meat. Screw everything else. And Forza is a very good example of this in video game form. Interacting with the menus of a Forza game is transactional. Forza already assumes you like cars. All menus in the game are just there, exemplifying the Microsoft corporate simplified easy access Metro menu style. Big square buttons that just navigate you to the next menu. A car dealership that just shows the car from one angle. Very little excitement in the way it presents the cars. This is simply because an American audience does not care about any extra presentation. They would just want to race the car. There is no need for a big presentation of every vehicle because Forza, as I said, already assumes you like them and thus takes little time to delay your interaction with them. Interacting with Gran Turismo, however, is an experience. Every moment of Gran Turismo is a moment to show you not just how a car looks, but how it looks within Gran Turismo, within the more beautiful reality. There is an intended mood that Gran Turismo is intending to evoke because the game itself likes cars so much, it created a neat little world where they exist and where everyone really likes them. The little hub world with the tiny buildings, the GT auto shop having uniformed men perform whimsical tasks to your car, the jazzy soundtrack that persists in popularity even from the older titles, the song and dance that occurs every time you buy a car. When a race ends in Gran Turismo, the game does have comparatively obtuse menus, but that is because, for better or worse, there is a Gran Turismo experience that Polyphony Digital wants to create. Despite my current leaning positivity towards Gran Turismo, it should be said I come to this video as a reformed ex-bot. I spent way more time when I was younger playing Forza. This is because Forza really leans into the playground aspect with its approach, and that is because Forza has only vague progression that is very player-oriented. Most races have any car being valid for every race, simply because the Forza campaign warps itself to make sure the player never feels like the car they want to use isn't valid in a race. Especially evident in Forza Horizon, which we will get to later. Gran Turismo loves to inconvenience the player. In fact, it really loves to make the player experience challenges in the progression by making you buy new cars to do one very particular race that in of itself is very difficult because the AI cheats. Regardless, the thesis of my video is now taking shape, as one can see how culturally, even games that both strive to be real will approach the method in different ways. Gran Turismo is a presentationally superior game, yet wants players to participate and express themselves within the rules the game defines. This is of course a rather Japanese way of going about things. Much like how turn-based RPGs have some of the best narrative and artistic beauty of any game available, but one must understand the at times difficult gameplay mechanics to see it. Forza, on the other hand, is kinda sorta 100% boring to navigate and look at, but is much more willing to let the player interact with the game in any way it wants. Use any car, it just goes zoom. You can spend considerable time in, say, Forza Motorsport 4 just picking a car in free mode and racing a la carte. Something you cannot do in Gran Turismo, as you gotta unlock everything first there. The very American way of doing that, though. The player is living out their own power fantasy, so the digital world that exists must bend to my will and make me feel like I'm the best racer of them all. Much like how a Call of Duty game will continually reward the player with new items and progression, even if the player themselves acts and plays like Stevie Wonder. I should also bring up the newer titles in these series, where both are grindy. But these games are not grindy in an RPG way, where there is always achievable progression so long as you have the right skill. No, instead, they are both grindy in an insidious and or monetizing way. Gran Turismo 7 is grindy in a, we want to make you sick of grinding the same races for money so you feel enticed to buy a car with in-game currency. Forza Motorsport 8, or whatever the hell it's called, on the other hand, is grindy in a, we want you to keep grinding your card levels so you keep playing and we can farm your interaction data. It's fucking lame. Manipulation of the player in such a manner. Not to mention how both of these games are online for whatever reason. It's not like the older games were worse off being offline. Regardless, both of these titles are still very limited in what they can do gameplay-wise and aesthetic-wise, because To Be Real has only one answer, so there is a very particular way that the Toyota Supra is going to handle and act, and so both devs try their damnedest to make that part real, but infuse their own method of getting you in that car, on that track. So, what if we go a bit more arcade then? Sega GT 2002, or in this case, its often forgotten sequel expansion, Sega GT Online. I bet you weren't expecting this game, eh? But I bring this game up with a tinge of nostalgia, but also with a bit of statement. That is because this game is a very good example of an earlier simcade racing game, where Forza and GT are not hardcore simulators to the nth degree. There is still a very clear emphasis on complex vehicle tuning, learning the track lines, and, of course, the handling being fine-tuned to work the best with a wheel, not a pad you pee on. A simcade title basically takes those elements, simplifies them a smidgen, and then makes the game easy to control with the controller that God intended you to control with, a pad. Some will argue with me on what actually constitutes a simcade, but if you are racing on realistically proportioned closed tracks, using real cars with upgradable and tunable parts, plus having the game easily controlled and understood with a pad, I do not know how this game can be considered anything other than a simplified arcade version of a sim game, you nerds. Sega previously would make very arcade games, such as the ever-lovable Daytona USA or the oh-so-charming Sega Rally. So in making their inevitable competitor to Gran Turismo on the Dreamcast, they would opt to not completely be simulational, but rather add strong elements of arcade. People seemed quite confused about this at the time. In a review of the original Sega GT, Edge magazine said, quote, "The fundamental problem with Sega GT is the game's inability to decide whether to stay close to Sega's arcade roots or venture down the simulation route, choosing instead to hover uncomfortably somewhere in between." Nowadays, that exact description could be applied to Forza Horizon, which sits directly in between arcade handling with mild simulation complexity. So that brings to question, what does a Japanese simcade game play like? Well, I'll tell you how it plays. It plays fine. Handling is acceptable. A Lotus feels light. The Dodge Charger is a brick. Track designs are all original, but fun. And the Sega GT mode is simplified version of Gran Turismo simulation mode. You upgrade your car to progress, buy new cars as you see fit, do side events for money, license tests to progress, yada yada. I may come off, or I may speak of this in a derogatory manner, but Sega GT actually, without question, in my humbly correct opinion, does a very good job of simplifying the Gran Turismo formula. Think of it as the working man's GT, for the individual whomst wants to get into Gran Turismo but can't, simply because he does not have the time, because that game can be a significant time and skill investment if you let it, and not everyone can grind a game when they are grinding their real-life wagey job. And thus, Sega GT arrives to save you from that and have a shorter, tidier, simplified way to get that experience. Yet, at the same time, this game carries a hell of a vibe alongside of it. Oh yeah, this game is a bop. Soundtrack, 10 out of 10. Every racetrack has its own soundtrack, sort of. Every menu has its own theme. Sega knows what they are doing with this music. Sega GT is a game that loves to use music cohesively to create a very particular mood and vibe of any given race. Yet, the charms of this game carry beyond just the modes in music, like how the garage that you always see your simulational mode car in can be decorated with small little low-res objects, and when you race, a picture of your car racing said race goes on the wall behind said car alongside trophies. And there is an option just to look at your wall of trophies, your achievements in your rinky-dink garage. There is a pleasant visual progression in how your garage is barren in the beginning, and then you have a wall of trophies, photos, and random knickknacks behind your big Dodge Viper at the end. Wonderful. You may have noticed that I continue to talk about Gran Turismo, even though I've most certainly started talking about a different game. This is quite simplifically because many simcade games cannot escape what inspires them, that being the almighty realistic game. You cannot compare Sega GT to any other racing game. This is because it is a Sega attempt at Gran Turismo, but with its own flavor. So the only way to compare and contrast is to compare it to the fact the game says GT in the title, and contrast that with the fact that they both have cars driving around closed tracks with jazzy music. Even other GT clones made by other JP devs like Racing Battle C1 Grand Prix or Enthusia Professional Racing cannot escape the fact that they decided to have jazzy music with very stylish graphic interfaces and realistic handling. I have no idea if this is a Japanese matter of taste, or the devs really thought the key to success was having a particular music style overplay stylized menus. I am not saying the Japanese have no creativity when it comes to racing games, but it's as though when they decided to make a copy of the god of racing games, they just seemed to have written his name backwards and then said, hey, we're just as good. Quite unlike how the Western devs made an arcade circuit game with real cars. Case in point, Project Gotham Racing 2. Funny enough, both these games were the Xbox exclusive racing games before Forza, even though both are not nearly as simulational. I guess most people from afar can't tell the difference. Yet, I enjoy both of these games, despite the differences in how they present real cars with semi-realistic handling going around tracks. For background, Project Gotham is made by Bizarre Creations, a British studio known for making good racing games that no one appreciated, leading up to a point where they made the mostest creativist racing game, and then got canned because we can't have a racing game without realism. Yet, it is not being hyperbolic to say that their best game is Project Gotham Racing 2. Why, you may ask? Because it is once again a simple, meaty racing game. All the fat trimmed, only racing the cars, but in a fun way. And before you claim to me PGR is not Simcade, I shall read this Eurogamer interview with the devs from 2003. In one particularly mind-boggling display of attention to detail, the team showed how each of the 103 cars is totally unique, being comprised of differing mass, tires, friction, and suspension, although Bizarre Creations is wisely getting the balance between realism and accessibility. Every possible stat was sourced either direct from the manufacturer or via enthusiast magazines, but the key point is the team isn't heading down the road of simulation over what feels right. We want to make the cars feel as fun as possible. Foremost, I think it's cute that the attention to detail like that was considered mind-boggling in 2003, when now people will bitch and moan if they cannot determine the difference between the Huracan base model and the Huracan Performante in Need for Speed. Yet alas, it was unprecedented to be as accurate in handling back then, which makes one appreciate how a simple, nice arcade racing game like this was considered to be feature complete back then. Progression is simple. Just do the race and unlock fast cars, and more tracks and do more races and the fasterest of cars, and then you say you got all the kudos. Beautifully simple. I love this game. However, what I love more about this game, as you guessed it, is how the game presents itself, or in this case, how it presents the cars. This game has 2 virtual showrooms. One is for particular car classes, where you can roam about a small garage and see your available cars, as well as walk up to an arcade cabinet and play a unique to PGR arcade game. Wonderful. So many games have games within games, but the fact that the secret game is within a racing title is on an arcade cabinet one would otherwise think is just window dressing is truly spectacular. But the second virtual showroom, I think, is even better, because it is basically a virtual museum for cars. Many other games claim to be a virtual museum for cars, but I believe the virtual showroom in Project Gotham 2 is the best museum for cars because it is literally a museum. You stroll about listening to some lo-fi soundtrack, moving from exhibit to exhibit, just looking at the nicely pixelated car models. I would spend hours here when I was younger, looking around this little exhibit, test driving the cars, looking at the cars, examining the 2D sheep. A cinematic Forza Vista is cool, but there is something charming about a virtual car museum. Each car is deliberately placed in particular spots, so you can see the newest and coolest car when entering certain showrooms. You can also tell this is a British game, because the Mini Cooper is kept with the German BMWs. The showroom is simple, kind of lethargic to navigate, but it's all the more interesting that Bizarre Creations decided yes, the simplistic menus we have otherwise created will be matched by the German-ass-looking showroom with the cars strewn about it. Despite the showroom's quirkiness, it is still a very Western racing game. That being, it is all gas, no brakes, so it just gets right to the racing with very little downtime. So, it is thus most certainly missing the Simcade mild car tuning. But alas, I would be lying if I said all Western racing games did not try to prove to you that cars are cool, and I think there is no better example of it than the first Forza Horizon. I love Forza Horizon 1, but I also hate it for what it did to arcade racers. In regards to what I love about it, it does a very excellent job at not only creating a festival for cars, but also making you participate in a festival for cars, quite unlike the 4 sequels that spawned it, which claim to do the same thing, but fail. In Forza Horizon 1, you are a participant in the Horizon event. You start as a nobody and get an armband telling you your place in this race, but as you do more of the race, you gain a higher place. There are rivals who talk down to you. They curse at you. You are a nobody, while they are a somebody. There is a sense that you, as the player, arrive at this festival to prove yourself, and the people who help you build your car support you in this endeavor. Starting off in a comparatively measly Coronado, the game does not hand out cars as much as the other Forza titles. You have to earn the cars by doing events and upgrading your car so you can beat faster cars and buy more cars and thus have the bestest car and defeat the finalist boss. Because Forza Horizon 1 has a final boss, a villain for you to defeat. Is it a cinematic final boss akin to the greatest in storytelling? No, but it does provide you with a conceivable, obtainable end goal. Everything I just described is quite unlike every other Forza Horizon game ever released. All of the newer games shower you in random cars, contorts its difficulty to whatever car you are driving. Everyone says you are the best of all time, even when you're garbage. And while you do have an open world not blocked off by guardrails, the most you do in this world is go through steep speed gates, do jumps, and drift corners. For the first time this was done, it was cool. But holy shit, Forza Horizon 5 is still doing it, and now every other open world racing game must do it. The Crew, Need for Speed, the upcoming Test Drive Unlimited, every racing game must now have an open world with random speed gates and drift zones and other bullshit. I genuinely don't get the appeal. Do people like this? People say Call of Duty makes the same game every year, but Call of Duty looks and plays slightly differently every year. But I am fairly certain I have been using the same goddamn Honda Civic model in Forza since 2005 to go through these gates with. Now, to be fair, as I calm down, the desire for a ginormous open world is a very Western desire, as an open world game is often considered a do-it-all kind of title that really gets you a value for your dollar. Western markets, most primarily Americans, are really obsessed with things that do it all. That's why we buy crossovers that are a combination of SUVs and wagons, why we revolutionized the smartphone so it could do everything. This is versus Japanese, who will specialize in doing some very particular niche thing and then become the best at it, meaning that many Japanese games don't have open worlds, instead focusing on smaller set pieces with storytelling, atmosphere, and attention to detail being more important. Hence why Yakuza games, which are sort of open world, have this said open world being small but dense, like cake when it comes to content. And then, when they do try to make bigger worlds to appeal to Westerners, it seldom works. Except, of course, when it becomes the greatest cake of all time. What does this have to do with Japanese racing games? Well, at first, I had no idea. I just wanted to complain about how much I dislike every game being open world. But then, after huffing some copium again, I realized there aren't actually many Japanese AAA racing games at all anymore. Outside of Polyphony, Sega stopped making racing games since they fucked up with that disappointingly uncontrollable Sega Rally. Bandai Namco forgot they made Ridge Racer. Everyone who tried to make a Gran Turismo clone gave up trying or went out of business, and the company who I quite so possibly believe made the closest thing to a Japanese open world Need for Speed, Genki, has fallen off of the face of the earth. And that's a shame, because their last real game they made for the West is a fucking vibe. Import Tuner Challenge is a real innocuous name, sounds like a mobile game, but in reality, this is the final, real entry in the Tokyo Extreme Racer series, which is by all metrics a purpose-built cult classic. The controls, jank. Plot, barely translated. Car customization, the best you've ever seen. Difficulty, like your opponents are not even there. Vibe, hell yeah. I may embellish when I say open world, because technically in these games you just pick from a particular Japanese highway you drive along on in a loop, and then challenge racers along the way on the said loop. So it's more like open track driving. But alas, I fuck with the game, the vibe, a lot. It's grindy as hell, and driving on a highway for the entire game does lose its charm about 30 minutes in, but there isn't many similar mission-based Japanese street racing games that exist with this production budget. It's a shame this series is basically dead now, but really, this was not the only PS2 series to die the instant it hit the Xbox 360 generation, an unfortunate side effect of how difficult it was for Japanese devs to acclimate to the HD era of gaming. Where in the PS2 era, smaller studios could really make oddball games, and since there was no conception that HD textures and models needed to be made, creating these textures and models was comparatively not as time-consuming. This is why we have games like Disaster Report, Naval Ops, Samurai Western, or in this case, Tokyo Extreme Racer. Games that had a greater emphasis on doing creative scenarios rather than focusing on graphical fidelity. Then the HD era hit, and the visual gap between high and low budget games widened even more, possibly to Grand Canyon levels. So if you actually wanted to have your niche video game title succeed, you needed to put more money into it than ever before. Suddenly, low-budget creative games weren't making money because the extra effort needed to make them likely would not gain a profit from the niche audience that these games would attract. That is why when you hear of, the dark age of Japanese games, when every Japanese dev was making really mass-market westernized titles, this was because they needed their games to sell to literally anyone, because doing goofy, middle-market things was no longer profitable. It also didn't help that their home market console, the PlayStation 3, was apparently incomprehensible to program for, forcing many of these already niche titles to be sold on the not home market console, where Western Xboxers would look at a game such as Tokyo Extreme Racer as, "What the fuck is this? Why are there no American or European cars? Why is there visual novel talking moments? Why isn't there an open world? Why can't this game just be like Need for Speed?" I am of course not dunking on Need for Speed, because although I really like Import Tuner Challenge, I also really like Need for Speed, if both for different reasons. Where Tokyo Extreme Racer is a vibe with a very unusual gameplay mechanics, Need for Speed is the big budget, angry American arcade racer with big color filters, CG cutscenes or on green screens, butt rock, and metal playing throughout. Oh yeah, this is the 2000s. It is actually quite interesting to look at how Tokyo Extreme Racer and Need for Speed approach their illegal street racing idea. In Tokyo Extreme Racer, it's seen as a lifestyle. People join teams, talking rather sophisticated manners about car tuning, and there is not a police car to be seen, ever. Need for Speed, on the other hand, is very every man for himself. Everyone is always very angry that you tried to challenge them to a race, and there is, of course, a high police presence, because fuck the police. I could go on about other minute differences between how the Japanese and the West in general look at car culture, but that would drag me way out of the scope of this video, and drag me out of the general scope of vidya. Although I always found it quite interesting how Western markets love to have many different cars from many different countries, where most Japanese racing games will have obscene amounts of Japanese cars and maybe a handful of cars from literally anywhere else. Like how Gran Turismo 4 has 37 gazillion different Mazda Miatas and Nissan Skylines, but has maybe only 13 BMWs total. This can be most attributed to the fact that the Japanese mainly only like Japanese stuff. There was much strife that occurred when Konami asked Western devs to make Silent Hill games to various results. This is why it was quite the shock when I learned that Bugbear, who made the Flat Out games, was going to be making a Ridge Racer game back in the early 2010s. Even more shocked was I to learn that this game is fucking ass. To put this in perspective, Ridge Racer was never a complex game. It was a racing game of drifting fast, sometimes drifting backwards in cars. That was the game. It was a certified banger, not the least because of an excellent soundtrack and interesting, sophisticated, futurist-looking kind of style. What's more, this series was always kind of difficult, especially the older arcade-based titles. Of course, when I say arcade, I mean actually going to a physical arcade, where games were difficult because they were designed to take your money. Only thing is, when the Japanese arcade games left the arcade, they took their difficulty with them. Just take one quick glance at 2D fighters today. They are robust, to say the least. I'm not going to try and draw some cultural aspect to it, but it is just a fact that the Japanese like difficult games, which is most unfortunate, as Ridge Racer Unbounded is the most difficult game in the series, but in all the wrong ways. Imagine Burnout and Split Second had a child, but conceived this child while Ridge Racer watched from afar in the cuck chair. That is this game. It is so unlike Ridge Racer in every conceivable manner. I'm convinced that Bugbear was originally developing a different game. Bamco saw it and said, "Ah yes, we will make a Ridge Racer game out of this." The handling in this game does not like drifting at all. So there goes the one Ridge Racer thing that exists. In fact, wall riding is very favorable. It's why the AI do it as well. Braking is for losers. And if you do brake, you will immediately get wrecked, or as this game calls it, fragged. Yet oddly, if you attempt to do the same thing to one of the AI, they won't get wrecked at all. In fact, you will just slow down more, and then they will slowly pull away from you on the straights, because although this game has no car customization, the AI cheat. They will be in an identical car to you and just pull away from you. On the one hand, this could inspire more skillful corner driving, but I just told you handling's bad and wall bouncing and riding is easier, so there goes skill. The split-second reference is more on the fact that you can destroy random trackside buildings and objects to either create a shortcut or destroy enemies. Only issue is the shortcuts are just straight paths to bypass pimples in the road. You may save half a second doing these, and they are a complete waste of your boost, where your boost is needed to perform these admittedly flashy moments. Oddly, the boosting in this game is like getting the star in Mario Kart, where just touching an opponent wrecks them. The only issue is that your opponents can use this boost like you and just immediately punch you down a few places at the, whiff of a button. There is no way to know if another car is using this unless you are behind them, and you never know if an opponent has their boost meter filled, so you can just be duking it out, rubbing against another car, only for them to boost and just wreck you. So what we have is a Burnout-style game where car combat is disincentivized because you basically have a secret get-out-of-jail-free card at any moment, and a split-second wannabe where the most epic parts of the game are not rewarded to use in the slightest. This game was a flop, and I am fairly certain it almost killed Bugbear because after this game, they did not make another game until Wreckfest, 6 years later. Not even mentioning how there has not been another mainlined Ridge Racer game to this day since this turd dropped. I originally played Ridge Racer 6 and Ridge Racer Unbounded to see how Western and Japanese studios making a game in the same series would work for the genre. But all I learned is that Bamco didn't understand what made Ridge Racer popular, and Bugbear just needs to keep making Wreckfest because this thing is a hot fucking mess. But it's such a shame because this game has a badass aesthetic going on. Aside for the orange urine filter that I will always adore, and the previously mentioned visually stimulating destruction, your position, split times, and lap count are all on the track, being that every corner tells you this information, so you never have to take your eyes off said track. I do not know why more games don't do this. In fact, I would almost want a racing game to have no HUD at all, just everything you need displayed on the track. That would be a pretty groovy, diegetic HUD, almost like racing game version of the health bar and such in Dead Space being on Isaac's armor. Yet, in the end, I have ran out of things to say about the two games at this point. This game just makes me mad. It is at this point, I could make a comparison between car combat games, but I do not know what else there is to say about the likes of Twisted Metal, Split Second, Burnout, and Blur that has not already been said or is abundantly obvious. Car combat is a very Western kind of thing. I can't even really recall a Japanese game that has a big focus on car combat. And if there is, it is likely another one of them niche titles I haven't heard of on PS2 or is only on PC. And I don't game on PC. I only emulate. Regardless, I think combat racing games, and maybe most arcade games, of the racing variety of course, have gone the way of the dodo simply because it'd be quite difficult to make them a big money live service. Because car customization is considered integral to racing games, so you can't sell skins. And Need for Speed Heat learned the hard way not to monetize car performance upgrades. Upon reflecting, pondering, and considering everything I have said in this video, I have realized most of it can be generally applied to any genre of game. The Japanese developer generally tends to like music, atmosphere, difficulty, whether through challenge or grind, basically seeing games as a sort of expressive art form. Western devs tend to see games as more of a playground, allowing gamers to interact with an environment so long as the player feels empowered at every moment, as this is just a game after all. Neither is a condemnation or a gratification, and there is an exception to everything I have just said. I am not saying Thing in Japan is better either. In fact, my favorite racing game ever, of all the times, is Burnout Paradise. In fact, when thinking about the philosophies of games and their creation, I am reminded of what the creator of Gran Turismo, Kazunori Yamauchi, said when he reflected on the development of the very first game on PS1 to AutoWeek magazine. Quote, "It took 5 years. In those 5 years, we could not see the end. I would wake up from work and go to sleep at work. It was getting cold, so I knew it must be winter. I estimate I was home only 4 days a year." There was nothing said after this. That is all the man had to say about the difficulty of developing the game. No poetry about how he could have improved development. No condemnation of crunch culture, even though it's a problem. To him, it is clear that those 5 miserable years were worth it, because now Gran Turismo is a household name and has a mid-movie about it. No matter where one is in the world, where one's environment inspires their philosophies, artistic pursuit brings many sacrifices to achieve what is desired. I cannot imagine the trials and tribulations it took to get the games I talked about in either country out the door, yet I must say I appreciate every one, even Ridge Racer Unbounded. Because video games are art, and I enjoy seeing the creativity of others, just as I hope you have enjoyed getting to the end of this video. Thanks for watching.